Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Getting Rooted, the show that is all about the journey of being rooted, reclaiming one's own truth, and embracing destiny. I'm Janine Hansel from Pong, your host, and I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor and trauma specialist in the state of Maryland. I'm also the founder and clinical director of Rooted Holistic Therapeutic Services. The content of this podcast is not counseling advice nor a substitute for individual therapy. The content is for information purposes only. The information provided is not intended to be used as a replacement for medical and mental health advice. Please seek and follow the advice of your licensed mental health and medical professional. Well, in the last episode, I did a lot of discussing around the label of people pleasing and why we have a hard time saying no. And I want to go a step further and discuss setting boundaries. As I've said before, uh, I am a self proclaimed boundary queen, and I've learned that I need to set boundaries for myself in order to maintain and improve on my own self care. It was a necessity. And so boundaries are really rules, limits, or guidelines that you set in order to let others know what you are comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. Boundaries are to identify ways for other people to behave towards you and what will happen if those boundaries are broken, right? So they know if I do this and Janine doesn't like it, this is how she's going to respond. Setting boundaries or healthy boundaries, to be more exact, is a relationship. In a relationship, creates a good foundation for a healthy relationship. So when you set healthy boundaries in your relationship, you are creating a good foundation. So people know what to expect, what not to expect, what you will allow, what you won't allow, right? And when we set these boundaries for ourselves, specifically in relationships, we're allowing our partner to understand and respect us. Now, there's different types of boundaries that we can set for ourselves. There are physical, time, conversational, relationship, and personal boundaries. And so I'm going to explain a little bit about each. And so, physical boundaries are those boundaries that we set for ourselves to ensure physical safety and proximity. So, like how far somebody can come close to you, how much they can touch you, where they can touch you. So, this may show up in your sexuality. This may show up in where you go, when you go places, like how close people can be if you're standing in like uh, um, a location or a place, and what we're comfortable with physically from other. Are we comfortable with touch? Are we comfortable with hugs? Are we comfortable with daps? Are we comfortable with no touch? And really being clear about what those physical boundaries are for you. The other boundary is time boundaries, and these are what we set to create a healthy mindset and schedule for ourselves. So, this includes setting limits on how much time we spend with someone or doing a certain activity or setting time boundaries for work, school, home life balance. So, really being clear about how much time you're willing to give to something or someone for a specific purpose or event. The other boundary is conversational boundaries. And these are setting limits on what you're willing to talk about, what you're not willing to talk about, what you're open to discussing, what topics are on the table, and which ones are not on the table. So this can include politics, religion, sexual content, the list goes on, sports, all those things, your trauma. All those things are important to really have those conversational boundaries clear. The other one is relationship boundaries, and this is the limits that are discussed and agreed upon with your partner, with your family member, with coworkers, with close friends, with acquaintances. Um, and again, those are the rules that are set up in those relationships. And then we have our personal boundaries, and these are the guidelines and rules that we set for ourselves to ensure that we are being aware of our needs and being aware of how much we can do and how we can respect and meet those needs in a healthy way. So, for instance, if your personal boundaries is that every 2 weeks you get your hair and your nails done, or you make sure you take a shower in the morning and the evening, no matter what happens, those are your personal boundaries. Those are the guidelines that you rule your life by, and you make sure that they are implemented and put in place. So, with all that being said, now we're going to really look at um why it's important to know your boundaries, right? So it's hard to set boundaries if you don't even know what your boundaries are. So boundaries are really based on your values, or the things that are important to you. So for example, if you value spending time with your family, setting firm boundaries about working late, right? Like you won't, if you will work 9 to 5, but you have children at home, you have a husband, or you have something scheduled with your sister or whatever, you will stick to your boundaries and not allow other people to really impact um your time, and you will be clear on that, so you know what your where your values are. And again, this is an alignment or a step further from what we discussed last week when we talked about, or last podcast, when we talked about saying no. So your boundaries are yours and yours alone, right? It doesn't have to look like anyone else's. Many of your boundaries might align with those who are close to you, but others will be unique to you, because it's all about what makes you as a person comfortable, what is necessary for you to live your best life. And so those are the things you need to look at. And knowing your boundaries before entering the situation, this will make it less likely that you'll do something that you're not comfortable with. So you have to know what is your non-negotiables. You got to know what are you willing to do, what you're not willing to do. And some things you can say, you always have the right to say no. I keep saying that, right? Making sure you have the right to say no. And when doing so, express yourself clearly and without ambiguity, right? Let it not be confusing, that there's no doubt about what you want. So you can say, I'm not comfortable with this, or please don't do that. Not at this time. You can say, I can't do that for you, or this doesn't work for me, or even I've decided not to fill in the blank. This is not acceptable, or I'm drawing the line at blank, or I don't want to do that. These are all acceptable statements that you can make in order to really set boundaries for yourself. Um, and so, how do you do this? How do okay, these are the statements I can say, but what am I doing it with myself in order to make this possible, right? So you got to really work on your body language. Right? If your face is not matching up with what the words that's coming out of your mouth, it's going to be harder for people to take you seriously, especially if these are new boundaries that you've never set before, right? So you have to face the other person. You need to make eye contact. You have to use a steady tone of voice at an appropriate value. So not quiet like a mouth, but not loud either, because if it's too loud, they're going to tune you out. So you have to use confident body language in order to communicate exactly what is it that you're trying to get across to them. Secondly, you need to be respectful, right? If you come out rude, disrespectful, or with an attitude, the likelihood that someone is going to hear you and respect your boundaries is low, right? So avoid yelling, avoid using put downs or giving the silent treatment. It's okay to be firm, but your message will be better received if you are respectful. I always tell clients, like, when we use interpersonal effective skills, you need to make sure that you're regulated before you can use the skill. The skill is not going to be effective if you are at 100. You need to be calm, cool, and collective before you can use some of these skills, unfortunately. So that means you got to use some emotion regulation skills. You may need to use some distress tolerance skills to get you all the way together, so that then you can utilize setting boundaries, right? No one listens to boundaries if they're being yelled at. I know I won't. So I'm not expecting someone else to do that. The other thing you need to do is plan ahead. So think about what you want to say and how you want to say it before entering a difficult discussion. This can help you feel more confident about your position. So really being proactive about it, right? Again, not setting the boundaries when you're angry, right? Like you got to the end of your rope, or this keep happening over and over again. You kept letting it happen, and now you're angry, and so now you want to set a boundary. Great, but you need to be able to be clear. So you have to get yourself together in order to communicate exactly what you want to say. And then the other thing is compromise. Now you're like, well, this is my boundary. There's no compromising. Well, when appropriate, you need to listen and consider the needs of the other person. You never have to compromise, but a give and take part of a healthy relationship, right? So, for instance, something that I can think of is in your relationship with your mate, if you don't like PDA in the community, right? You don't like to do public display of affection, but your partner loves it, right? So your boundary is like, no, I don't want to do any PDA in the community or in the street or when we're out. That's only for in the home, right? And you're like, but I really want to feel that connection. What can we do that we both can agree on, that I can respect your boundary, but also get my needs met? And so you may say, well, maybe holding hands is acceptable, right? So it's not kissing and, you know, fondling each other in the community, but holding hands is a safe middle ground for both you and that person so that you're getting your needs met in terms of some type of physical touch, and that person is not feeling overwhelmed or out of sort by um public display of affection. So really recognizing that there may need to be some compromise and recognizing that you don't have to compromise, but it will help in the dialogue and getting your needs met in overall. I hope that makes sense, right? So looking at these things that you kind of have to take in consideration, you might say, that's great, Janine, but why do I have a hard time setting boundaries, right? Thank you for all those tips. Maybe I'll put them in practice, but why am I having a hard time setting boundaries? But well, a big part of it is you have to be willing to expect resistance. You have to be willing to expect resistance from those that you are setting these boundaries with. When you start setting boundaries, some people will respond poorly. And this is common. You know, this is common. They're usually the people who have been benefiting from you lacking boundaries. So they don't want you to change, right? It's not going to benefit them if you say no, or you say, no, I can't do that, or please stop doing this to me. It doesn't benefit them. It doesn't make them feel good that you're setting a boundary, right? So some people may just need time to adjust to your new boundary or your new behavior or your new way of living your life, while others will use anger to try to manipulate you and coerce you away from setting your boundaries, right? They give you a guilt trip. And so one of the most common reasons for not setting boundary is the fear of conflict. I don't want to deal with conflict. I don't want to deal with a disagreement, right? I talked a lot about that in the last episode. Like, I don't want to deal with this tension. So I won't set a boundary, even though I really need it, and I'm unhappy. I don't want to make other people unhappy. So you don't want, you not wanting to upset or anger people is really you sacrificing your own needs and wants to keep the peace. Yes, people pleasing. Exactly. Thank you. It's tempting, right, to return to passivity when others don't like your boundaries. However, even when your boundaries provoke anger or resistance, it doesn't mean you shouldn't set them, right? That's not an excuse to not set them. It means that you need to ask for help and take steps to keep yourself safe, right? So maybe not being alone with that person when they're threatening you or being aggressive or volatile. You got to do what you need to do to keep yourself safe. And sometimes it helps to remember that when people resist your boundaries, it's a confirmation that the boundary is necessary, right? If the boundary is needed when they start pushing back, you're like, oh, yeah, this is definitely a necessity in this relationship in order for us to continue to move forward. Um, but as I said before, you're not a gatekeeper. You're not responsible for how others react to your boundaries. That's not your responsibilities. You don't have to make them feel better or take responsibility for the consequences of their actions. That is not your responsibility. You are only responsible for your own feelings and how you react and behave in this relationship, because boundaries are not for them. It's for your own well-being, and it's not to control others. You're not doing it to control them, to tell them how to do things. You're just sharing with them how you want to be treated, right? Boundaries should never be an attempt to control or punish other people. They're a form of self-care, something you do for your own well-being that also benefit other people as well, because it protects you from being taken advantage of, or overcommitting, or overworking, or feeling overwhelmed, both physically and emotionally, um, and not being abused by people that don't respect boundaries. So, of course, we all want people to respect our boundaries, but we got to remember that they don't have to. But we have to accept that we can't make them accept or respect our boundaries. And with that, we that gives us a lot of communication. It communicates a lot to us what we need to do in that relationship and whether that relationship is really for us, right? So when we set boundary, it's a statement of who we are and what we need. Your boundaries say, I matter. It says my feelings matter, my ideas matter, my health matter, my dreams matter, my needs matter. And if others won't treat you well, you have options, right? You can emotionally detach yourself from that person, you can physically distance yourself, or you can just end the relationship. Boundaries are about doing what's right for you and not about forcing others to do what you want. With setting boundaries, it's a skill that really takes practice, and I hope these tips make setting boundaries a bit easier and really helping you realize where you are in this process and where you are on this journey, of setting healthy boundaries for yourself. And if you're just beginning to set boundaries, you may feel guilty. You may feel guilty, and perhaps maybe selfish or mean, or that's what you're being told, because this is new. Not because you're doing something wrong, but it's unnatural for you in what the stage that you're in, because you're so used to just doing whatever somebody else wants or going with the flow or whatever what other people want. So your needs are valid, and setting boundaries will get easier the more you do it. Trust me, it will become like a muscle the more you do it. And so, with that, I want to end today's podcast with a guided meditation called Imagining Your Inner Land to Build Healthy Boundaries. And I want to invite you to go on this journey with me today as we close this discussion. Um, it, you can, pause the podcast if you want to do this. If you're listening while you're driving, please don't do the mindfulness while you're driving. But if you are somewhere safe and comfortable and quiet, this would be a great practice. You can pause this podcast, come back to it, to do it. But I think this will be helpful for you in navigating this new um, place of setting healthy boundaries for you and those relationships that are in your life. Okay. So I just want you to take a few moments, noting where you are, noting where your feet are, noting where your body is landed, if you're laying, if you're sitting, and knowing that this guided meditation is for helping you build healthy and purposeful boundaries. When you make a healthy boundary for yourself, then things that sometimes have hurt you in the past would not be able to reach you anymore. Boundaries give to, as well as providing some life essentials. And so let's begin, as we always, by breathing together. So taking 5 deep breaths now with me to oxygenate your body and all of its systems. And as you feel the weight of your body and how it presses down, make sure that your spine is completely straight and your posture exudes that you are confident. Gently close your eyes, increasing your ability to focus. And as you breathe easily and gently, you feel safe and relaxed. My voice guiding you is like a beacon of light through the darkness. As the sun rises, you see you are standing in the beautiful lush green grass, and there's a small house that you've built by hand in the middle of it. This house represents you and all the work that you put into yourself, and the grass represents the world outside of you. You decide that it would be good to plant some trees and some shrubs so that these plants will aid in protecting you from harm, and they also benefit the world. For example, a raspberry bush is very spiky and dense, yet it gives bounty of fruits for us to enjoy and be nourished by. If you plant many in a row, they will protect you as well as a tall electric fence. But this plant also gives. It serves two purposes. When you plant tall trees, they will protect you from harsh winds if placed in a way that is good through all of the seasons. Tall trees supplies us with the most oxygen, therefore they're giving while also protecting. The trees also serve many purposes here. You look at these beautiful life forces that you are planting on your land, and you notice they need a water source. You find the lowest lying area and begin digging down and around, making the shape of a small pond. As you step back from the circle of dirt you've created, you know that only a few heavy rains need to pour down and it will begin to fill and turn into a natural source of water. This pond serves many purposes on your land. It not only provides you and the wildlife with water, but it also gives you somewhere to go to meditate and reflect on the good things in your life and the good things that you do for others. Closer to your house, you see you need some vegetables and fruits. So create a garden that is easy for you to access and water when necessary. You plant all of the fruits you like and any kind of vegetables you need. Your garden flourishes and provides. All this garden needs from you is to be tended to. You look around and you see you need an orchard. So you strategically plant many apple trees and other fruiting trees right next to the protected area by the big tall trees and a little closer to the pond so that they can drink. This orchard supplies you with the most delicious apples you've ever tasted, and their nutrients are all off the charts. You look around your plot of land and you are proud. Not only do all these plants protect you and your home, but they give to you and the community around them. So make sure you work on the garden within you and put up proper barriers that, if planted well and with love and care, they also give. You are protected and allowed to lead a happy life. And lastly, look again at your hand built home and make any necessary changes to it. You are an excellent builder after all, and the land is yours. Good job today. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast, and I hope that mindfulness was a helpful closure to our discussion. Make sure to follow our podcast where all podcasts are streamed. Follow me on Facebook at Getting Rooted 23 and on IG at Getting_Rooted, as well as on TikTok at Getting Rooted. And make sure to comment on Facebook and on Instagram so that we can have a conversation. For that's the best part and my favorite part of doing these podcasts. Until next time, be well and make sure to reclaim your own truth and embrace destiny.